Good. Hello, my name is Casey and I'd like to welcome you all here tonight on behalf of the Glenelg Shire Council and respectfully acknowledge the traditional lands and waters of the Glenelg country. I acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and through them to all Aboriginal people. We're very excited to have our local author Elizabeth Clements here tonight to talk about her new book Achieving Parenthood, which Liz co-authored with a number of other people across Australia and America. So welcome, and I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, thanks for being here. So Achieving Parenthood, it's a pretty special project. It's sort of, I didn't expect to be in a book like this, and I was actually pursuing some children's books that I've written and sort of going down that route to get those illustrated, and I had spoken to one of the publishers, and along our chats he sort of unraveled this story with me, and he said, I've got a lady and she's putting together this book and I really think you should put your story into it. So I was a bit hesitant because it's a pretty private story, but it's been a long time and I felt that it's really important. So I think most of you know, but the story is about the stillbirth of my son Jaden, and that happened a long time ago, so back in 2006. And I guess part of me felt like it was a good time to really start advocating more than just keeping it to myself, for other women to be able to not feel so alone and isolated, and really share that story. And it did take a lot of courage to sort of put that out there, but I'm really proud of doing it, not only for the story but also because people know who Jaden is now. You know, like, it's part of his legacy, part of his life, part of me being able to mother him even though he's not here, if that makes sense. So it was a challenging writing process, but really good as well, a little bit cathartic, like very healing at the same time. So it took me I was homeschooling and writing in lockdown. It was loads of fun, and just sort of took my time. Every now and again I had to take breaks and just really step away from it and sort of reassess how I was going to approach the situation. But it's pretty raw, pretty honest. So I'm proud of it. I don't know what else. Yeah. The book is about multiple scenarios for different families, so it covers things like miscarriage, IVF, adoption, surrogacy, same-sex partners going through that route of trying to have a family. So it's pretty amazing, and it really breaks the silence for a lot of stories, a lot of things that people don't like to talk about. It feels uncomfortable. It feels, sort of not like the nicest topic, so we avoid it, but it's really important, I think. So
I think it is an important topic, Liz, and it's great that you've been able to share your story. What was the process? Tell us about the process a little bit, about co-authoring with so many other authors. How did all that happen?
It was pretty interesting. So Kelly Harridan, she's compiled the book. She actually published a book previously about her surrogacy journey. So she has twins that she went through that process with. And she contacted me and sort of said, we're doing this project, we've got all these stories. And at first I sort of felt like I wouldn't quite fit in. I was like, oh, my story is very different to all the others. Like, I didn't necessarily have trouble with infertility, and I didn't have to go down those routes. And so I was like, oh, I'm not sure. But along the process, and Kelly would often say to me, this story is going to be so crucial for this book, like, because it just isn't talked about. Like, there's not really any books that have someone's stillbirth story in it that's really open and honest and makes it okay to talk about it. And so I felt that was really empowering, because you sort of question, like, I was really happy to share. But yeah, so we had training meetings. We got together and did, I guess mentorship sessions. We'd all jump on the call. It was pretty interesting, and getting different people's perspectives and ideas, and having to go through that editing process with so many different people. And so we'd jump in, and instead of reading everyone's chapters, we might read the chapter ahead or behind us, and that was how we sort of helped each other go through that process. And we had several editing processes that we had to go through, and formatting and all that fun stuff. And so it was pretty exciting to be able to be part of that, and have a lot of say in what was happening and how the book was coming together and the cover and things like that. So yeah.
Where did the cover come from?
So I don't know if people know, but pineapples in the fertility world have a lot of significance, because they symbolize like being fertile, and they also have a lot of pineapples themselves have a lot of good nutrients and qualities when you're trying to conceive. So in that space, pineapples are a huge significance. So that's why those two, mummy and baby, sort of pineapples are on the cover. Yeah. I suppose it's not too serious either when you get stuck into the book, and it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Very
good.
I don't know if anyone has
Anybody else got questions for
Where
me?
were all the other people from?
So we have mostly Australian authors. There's a couple in America. They have a chapter in the book about their process of adoption, and we have a lady who is from Australia, but she lives in overseas, I think maybe like Indonesia. So that was interesting too, coordinating with people from overseas, and everyone else is like Queensland, South Australia, Victoria, so kind of all over. Yeah.
And there's a couple of male authors in there you were saying before?
Yeah, there are. So Ocean Reeve, he's actually owns the publishing company, but he himself was adopted, and so they asked if he would be interested in putting his story in there, because his story is quite unique. Like when he found out he was adopted, which happened a long way after, like he was quite old, a lot older when he found out, and so he went through a big process of, I guess, grieving and figuring all of that out. So his story's in there. And then we have Dr. Gavin Sachs, who is an amazing doctor and really leading a lot of research in the fertility community with natural killer cells and that sort of stuff. So his chapter in there is quite good as well. And then the rest are all female authors, which is cool. Yeah.
So have you had the chance to meet any of the other authors in person, or has it just been via the video link?
Yeah, just via all the digital world.
Is there are they looking to get you all together at some stage?
Yeah, so normally they would have like a launch in person, but because we launched it basically in the middle of all the insanity that we're in, they just did an online launch. And so there is one author who lives in Mount Gambier, so hopefully at some stage I'll be able to
So close yet so far.
yeah, that's right, jump over and meet her, and then there's another author in Adelaide. So but we've been able to chat quite a bit and sort of go on Instagram and do little live interviews and things like that. So, and Kelly's in Queensland, and quite a few other authors are in Queensland as well. So one day we'll hopefully be able to meet in person and really celebrate.
It would be nice because you know so much about them. Like they're such personal stories, like you said. So
Yeah,
to
you
meet
really-
them would be
Yeah, you sort of feel connected to them even though you've never met them properly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
And what do you hope people will take away from reading the book?
So for me, I think what is most important is that people gain an element of compassion, like a different way to approach someone who's grieving the loss. I think at the moment there's so much stigma around loss, especially like child loss. Like nobody wants to talk about babies that have died. It's just it feels too yucky. But the thing is that so many of us don't have a choice. Like I don't want to talk about it either, but it wasn't a choice that I had. And so I think it's really important that rather than approaching the situation like, oh, this is a bit uncomfortable, that we just like hold people in that space and go, okay, it's okay, let's talk about it, and not sort of that people learn it's really not about me trying to comfort you, because that's what ends up happening a lot, is that you go, I'm really wary of how other people are feeling about, like, if I say, you know, I've got 3 living children, that is hard for people. They kind of go, what does that mean? It automatically makes them think, well, if you've got 3 living children, then that means someone had to have died. And so I think for me, it's that one, people who are going through it will be able to read it and realize that all the feelings and emotions and things that they felt and went through were so normal. And there's no shame in it. And then number 2, that healthcare workers and just people in general, families of others suffering a loss, will be able to read it and really gain what not to say, what to do and what not to do. Because I think there's a lot of sort of toxic positivity that can happen in this situation where people are trying so hard to make it okay, you know, like, you're doing amazing, or it's all going to be fine, or when you have another baby, and all of those things are extremely harmful to someone. So I think it's about learning that and just really changing our perspective. That's my hope for it. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Also in the book you touched on self-advocating. When you're in that position of feeling like something's not quite right, you know, during pregnancy, that's probably something else you want people to take away from it as well. Like, people who haven't, you know, been in the position, but to self-advocate if something was to feel not quite right. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you. I think along my journey, I sort of look back, and instead of looking back with guilt, I'm able now to look back and think, what should have been done differently, like not in a negative way or a bad way, but how I want it to be different for other people. When you're kind of sick and not thinking straight, you might not be able to vocalize your needs. And also one of the things I really want to advocate for is the change, like in medical systems, where, you know, a mother might be going in saying something's not right, and she's often told, like, everything's fine, baby seems fine. But the thing is that you know your body best, and you know your baby best. And there's a lot of myths that happen around pregnancy, you know, like babies stop moving later in pregnancy, which is not true. And so mums often think like, oh, it's okay that the baby's slowed down a bit, but when really it's not. So I think those...
Have a drink of orange juice.
Yeah, have a drink of... Yes.
Yeah.
Have some sugar, have some cold water. All of those are myths, and they need to be really broken down, because they're actually so dangerous for mums and babies. And it's not about being over medicalized, that's not a word, but it's about just like recognizing and really standing up for, like, that you know your body. And there's a lot of women at the moment who are really advocating for that, and something called Count the Kicks, which is also really important, and hospitals are jumping on board with that, putting signs up like, have you felt your baby move today, and things like that. So it's really important, because in Australia alone, 6 babies every day are stillborn. So that's massive. Like, it's a high number. It's over 2,000 families, you know, that are a year that are dealing with this. And I'm part of a group, a SANS Facebook group, which is a private group for parents who have lost children. And I haven't been part of that for a long time. And like every day, I'm just blown away. Like, you know, people on there like, my baby passed away 2 days ago or 3 weeks ago, or I'm trying to figure out how to deal with this loss, or I'm angry, or I'm whatever I'm feeling, you know. And I just kind of keep thinking, oh, it's not really happening, but we know that it is. It's just that nobody talks about it at all. So yeah, I hope to really change that and sort of make some noise in that area.
Thanks for talking about it.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important, and I think as well something else that's really important for me is recognizing that it's not just about grieving, it's also about the fact that a woman is postpartum after she's had a stillborn baby or a miscarriage or whatever loss she's suffering, and that we often forget about that, because we just go like, oh, you don't have a baby anymore in your arms, you know, but your milk is still going to come in. You're going to have all that postpartum bleeding, you're going to have all of that happening still, and yet you just don't have a baby to show for it. And I think that's really important. Like, I remember wandering around the shops or wherever I was, and I just wished I had this big t-shirt that said, I'm a mum. Like, nobody knows I'm a mum because nobody can see my baby. And so I think that's really important for me as well, is just helping others recognize, like, this woman's grieving and she's also still in like that 4th trimester of pregnancy. So yeah.
So what are you going to write next?
So I've got some children's books that I've written, and I've got someone illustrating those.
Great.
Yeah, which is exciting. And it's just, I'm not sort of putting too much pressure on myself, but I would like to. They're really empowering for children. They're not your typical, I mean, like, I love a good story, but I think it's really important to give kids, like, the ability to voice how they're feeling and what they're thinking in a way that's friendly and open, and parents can relate and other people can relate. So I started writing a story about, and they're sort of rhyming. I love rhyming children's books.
Always good. In
Yeah,
books.
so good. Yeah. So yeah, I've written a story for one of my children about some of the things that they struggle with, just with, you know, being quite reserved and just finding their voice. So those are my next projects, and the illustrator that I'm working with, she actually has some amazing illustrations that she's asked me to write too.
Oh.
So yeah, so that's exciting. So I'm working on those.
Right.
And yeah.
And I did hear that there might have been a second one of these.
There is a volume 2 that's going to be starting, well, I think they're working on it now, like collecting various stories from different authors, or soon to be authors. You know, some of the people in here have never written before, so this is just them sort of telling their story and us being able to help guide people through that. So yes, volume 2. I'm not probably going to be in it. That was a pretty big process, but it'll be good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone?
I wonder, Liz, if through the storytelling you found any kind of healing, or and the other women and things like that? Like, have you always been able to talk about it the way that you do now?
Yes and no. So I haven't probably been able to be this open about it. I suppose I always worried, like, about, you know, my family. Like, for my husband, it's a very private story, so for him, he was like hesitant. But I guess my way of addressing that was like, this is my story and it is part of my healing, so I need to just move forward with it. And I think for me, what became more important is just allowing other people, which has happened, to share their stories and to not feel afraid to do that. And I've had some of the most incredible connections with people, like family members even, that I didn't really know, that I've been able to connect with, which has been amazing, that have been going through some of the same things that I went through. And so I didn't ever think I'd be able to be on the other side of, like, helping other people cope. And that's pretty special, to feel like, because I've shared Jaden with the world, other people are being able to heal, or being able to, like, ask me, you know, is it normal that I'm feeling this way, or I'm really anxious for this, or I want to have another baby, is that gonna, you know, be okay? Like, are people gonna think I'm doing the wrong thing? All that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think I'm much more able, and it started a few years ago where I used to really struggle when people would ask me, like, the biggest example, how many children do you have? It was the biggest struggle for me, because I was like, what do I say? If I say 4, they're going to be like, well, where's your other kid? And then I'm going to have to talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it to everyone. And then if I say 3, I'm not honoring him because he existed, and I, like, gave birth to him, and he was a real person. And so it was like this mini argument in my head. People probably wondered why it took me so long to answer, but I'd be like, and then I would either say 3 and then feel really bad, or I would say 4 and then hope they didn't ask me. So now I'm able, and I just really felt okay with saying I have 3 living children, and then people, it's on them to ask or not to ask, or to sit with that, and I'm okay with that. I don't feel bad anymore about that. like those emotions that they have, it's for them to sort of process. Yeah, so that's been really good for me.
Have you had a lot of other women come to you and say, like, I read your story, and even though they haven't been through the same process of what you went through, obviously, but they had a similar sort of, they've lost a baby and it's like opened up wounds for them, and like just said, oh wow, like, you know, because I know for me, it did for me as well, reading all those stories. I thought, wow, there's so many other people that have been in that same situation, and I wish I had that knowledge back then, like now that it's there. So
I
it
actually
really gave me clarity, and a good it helped heal me a lot with my emotions.
That's amazing.
So
I'm so glad. I have had quite a few people message me of all ages, older women message me who say, like, I've never really talked about it, you know, it just wasn't done so many years ago. You just you maybe didn't even get to see your baby. They would just take them away. So who have messaged me like, thank you for sharing your story and making it okay, and this is what's happened to me and I've never really talked about it. And it's just amazing to be able to hold that information with them and connect in that way. And other people have written me that haven't been through it at all, and they've said, this has really helped me to know how to approach that situation. Like, it's helped me gain empathy, which is really important to have. So I have had quite a few. I had another lady who I've never met, but she bought a book through one of the other authors, and she specifically bought it for my chapter and said that she really wanted her daughter and partner to read it because they'd gone through a loss, and she felt that it would be healing for them. So it's been really special to be able to have that sort of a sad connection, but also it's really good that we can connect that way, because otherwise you feel pretty isolated. Which I felt for a long time, so I understand what that's like, holding that all to yourself.
With your 3 living children, you obviously now celebrate your loss. Not celebrate, but like, you know, embrace that you do have another child. How do you've had obviously some pretty big conversations with them. I'm not sure how old they are. How do they process that?
So we've always spoken about Jaden with them. He was our first, and right away from when the kids were just little, he always existed for them. So they talk about him like they knew him.
That's really
it's beautiful, and they often go, oh, if Jaden were here, you know, it would be like this, or I'm sure he would like this dinner, or, you know, that's that extra space, is that extra chairs for Jaden. And my youngest actually often, I miss Jaden, Mum, I just wish he was here. And that sometimes breaks me a little bit, because I think, oh, I wish he was too. And we really sort of think a lot about the sort of person he would be, you know, like, oh, Jaden would have been the peacekeeper. Like, he would have been that, like, he would have kept us all here, like, settle down, everyone. We really need that sometimes. But so we talk about it a lot, and they often, like, my youngest will be like, oh, I have 2 sisters and a brother, and sometimes people like look at me like, I don't know what to do here, and I'm like, and he'll say, and he died, and they kind of, and I'm like, he did.
I love how raw they can comfortably be.
He died, and that's just how it is.
That's okay.
Yes.
Whereas us as adults kind of like, oh,
I don't know what to
you
do.
said, I've got 4 children or 3 living, and you know the other person is instantly uncomfortable. I love that children are like, that's how it is.
Exactly. And sometimes I sit there and just kind of go, how's this gonna go? Like, what are they gonna, how are they gonna do? And I've had someone like sort of look at me and go like, is that true? And I'm like, yeah, he's not lying, it's true, and sort of explain and just like really support him in that, like so that he doesn't ever feel uncomfortable like he said the wrong thing. I just want them to know. So it's really good, and yeah, we celebrate Jaden's birthday every year, and so it's pretty good in that sense. I think it's really important not to hide those things from our children, like
especially daughters as well, and your son as well.
Yeah,
Break the
for
stigma.
sure. Yeah, exactly.
They might also be able to do that.
Yeah, and my eldest daughter, like sometimes I think it, like especially since doing this, a lot of her friends are like, oh, I want to read your mom's book, and she's like, oh, I'm not sure, you know, because it's such an intense, and they're like, oh, what's it about? And she's kind of like dealing with that now as well. Like it's a whole other scenario that we're dealing with, because it means a conversation that she's having now as a teenager. It's pretty full on, but I think it's also so important that like at her age, she's able to have those conversations, and really, like there's a lot of women who talk about having a stillborn baby that are like, I didn't even know what that was. Like I didn't even know that existed or what that meant. And so it happens, the change will happen by talking to younger generations about it. You know, the more they know, because it's not like you're trying to make pregnancy scary, but it's just, you have to know that like no one wants to talk about all the bad things that could go wrong, but the fact is that sometimes things can go wrong, and the more we know, the more we're empowered to be able to affect that differently. So yeah.
And be prepared to process it if it does happen, and ask for support.
Yeah, and there's
know you're not alone, I guess.
a lot of good support now, like than there probably was 15 years ago. I mean, we still had some good support, but even more so now. There's amazing people out there. So yeah.
Liz, is there any training for midwives in this?
No, I really hope to do that. I think there is training about loss. You know, so next year I'm hoping to go back and do my midwifery myself. But they do now have, which I didn't actually realize until recently, bereavement midwives, which is amazing, because it means that you can go to them, like even when women are having postpartum stuff and they're not sure about it, they just like call your bereavement midwife, because she'll be able to talk you through all those changes that might be happening that might be usual or unusual for after a loss. So, which is great. But I think probably there's still some gains we can make in the way we address a loss in a hospital specifically. But people are definitely getting a lot more on board with being more open about it, and the things that they do for mothers who have lost a baby now in hospital are great. Just really honoring the fact that they have had a baby in whatever stage you were at, like whatever gestation that was, whether it's an early loss or a late term loss, letting you, there's some beautiful things they do, which sound probably a little bit morbid, but they have things called a cuddle cot, which is a cold cot that your baby can stay in for as long as you feel you need them to. I would have loved a cuddle cot, but we did have, I don't even know the right word. It's like a cold fridge, I guess, like a small one in the room right next door to us. So whenever I wanted to see Jaden, I could see him. So they are really moving in a good direction for that, compared to, 30, 40 years ago, when it just wasn't even discussed. Yeah, which I do have a friend who went through that probably 40 odd years ago now, and that was a much different story for her. So yeah, I think slowly we're getting better at it, and hopefully the statistics, but over that long period of time, the statistics haven't really changed, which is a sad thing. So that's where we need to focus a lot of our efforts. Yeah.
In connection to support for mothers who have lost their babies, you've got a new project that you're working on. Maybe that's a bit of a segue into that.
Yeah, I do. So I am, when you were mentioning Deb, I'm working on a project called Angel Mamas boxes. I'm currently crowdfunding for that. But one of the reasons I put it together is because as I was reflecting on the things that would have helped me as a new mum, sort of going through grief, was I didn't really look after myself. I sort of was just going through like trying to make sure everyone else was okay and trying to fix their grief and plan a funeral and do all kinds of things that I never thought I would be doing as a new mum. And so I wanted to put together special boxes that would be able to be donated to hospitals or for people to purchase them for their loved ones, that would have all just beautiful stuff for a mum to look after herself. So yeah, so I'm almost 50% funded, which is great. But these boxes, so I've got really specific things I put in there, and they're all ethically made, and we've got a group of women making tote bags who are just amazing, and it's all in support of a mum just being able to look after herself. So it's got candles and pajamas and tea and bath salts, so all kinds of things that are just really nourishing, I guess, for a mother. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to really expand that to Australia-wide, but first I'll focus on local hospitals and just have them there. So what I want is for midwives to be able to have them available, so they don't have to think about it, they just know that there's something there that they can give to a mum. Yeah.
And we can donate to that.
Yeah, you can donate to that. So it's on my website. Yeah, there's a link. If anyone's interested. Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Alright. We'll just say thank you so much, Liz, for sharing your story. It's very important.
Thank you.
As are all the stories in the book, I'm sure. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Liz.